National Movement, the Early Phase, 1885 to 1919. Introduction. The national movement in India forms an important epoch in history as it helped to weld diverse people and sections of society into one nation. All sections came together to not only fight against the British rule but also to build a new country. Objectives. In this chapter, we will learn about early associations, the Indian National Congress, the moderate phase 1885 to 1905, extremist phase, which is between the year 1905 to 1920, which is Swadeshi movement, the moderates and the extremists, the First World War 1914 to 1919, early associations. In class 7, you have read about revolt of 1857 in which the soldiers, ordinary peasants, artisans and landlords and even princes joined the struggle against the British rule. While the movement was opposed to the British, it did not have any new vision of the country. It in fact wanted to restore the rule of the old kings and queens and also the same caste-based society. With the growth of English education during the late 19th century, in some major cities like Calcutta, Madras, and Bombay, a new consciousness began to develop. The intellectuals of the time opposed to the inequalities and injustices of the old social system. They wanted a democratic political order and they wanted at the same time to point out the exploitation and injustice caused by the British rule and fight to end it. This was the beginning of the national movement in India. In 1886, delegates to the Congress, numbering 436, were elected by different local organizations and groups, indicating its popularity in 1 year. Hereafter, the National Congress met every year in December in different parts of the country. The number of delegates soon increased to thousands. Its delegates were mostly lawyers, journalists, traders, industrialists, teachers, and landlords. There were very few women like Kadambari Ganguly, who was the first woman graduated from Calcutta. Mostly men from higher social background attended these sessions. During the first 20 years, the Congress was led by leaders who are known as moderate nationalists. The moderates urged the government to introduce a number of reforms. They demanded a greater voice for Indians in the government and in administration. They wanted the Imperial Legislative Council to be made more representative, given more power, and introduced 2 provinces where none existed. They demanded that Indians be placed in high positions in the government. For this purpose, it called for civil service examinations to be held in India as well, not just in London. The demand for Indianization of the administration was part of a movement against racism. since most important jobs at the time were monopolized by white Europeans. Leaders like Nauroji, R.C. Dutt, and Rana Day studied the economic impact of the British rule and concluded that the British were draining India of her wealth through taxes and other means and leaving her poorer and poorer. They drew attention to the problem of poverty and famines and blamed it on the British policies of excessive land revenue, export of grains, etc. The Congress passed many resolutions on the salt tax, treatment of Indian laborers abroad, and suffrages of forest dwellers caused by an interfering forest administration. The early leaders were convinced of the need for national industrial development to end poverty in India. However, the British rule was standing in the way of development as they not only were draining the wealth of India to England but also enabling cheap selling of British goods in India and restraining Indian crafts and industries. The moderate leaders reached out to people in different parts of the country by holding lectures, meetings, and tours. They believed that the British were committed to freedom and justice and would accept the demands when expressed properly. They carried on their agitation through newspapers, public lectures. They passed resolutions, led deputations to submit petitions to the government. In short, it may be said they adopted a policy of pray, petition, and protest. Often they were not able to persuade the government to change, but in the process formulated Indian opinion on important issues. This was very important for the future growth of Indian national movement. Extremist phase, which is between the year 1905 to 1920, which is Swadeshi movement. With the start of Swadeshi movement around 1903, the Indian national movement took a major leap forward. Women, students, and a large section of urban and rural population of Bengal and other parts of India became actively involved in politics for the first time. One major trigger for the movement was the proposal for partitioning of Bengal into East and West Bengal in 1903 by Curzon. The nationalists immediately saw this as a political act by the government to divide the Bengali people and also weaken the national movement. Even the ordinary people of Bengal were enraged by this act and took to streets to protest against it. There were massive protests, petitions, and campaigns, but they were not heeded to, and the government partitioned Bengal in 1905. Several protest meetings were held and a call was given for boycotting English cloth and salt. There was a tremendous mass response to this call. Boycott and public burning of foreign cloth, picketing of shops selling foreign goods became common in remote corners of Bengal and in many important towns and cities throughout the country. Women refused to wear foreign bangles and use foreign utensils. Washermen refused to wash foreign clothes, and even priests declined offerings which contained foreign sugar. This spontaneous unity of diverse social groups in the basis of nationalism. The early nationalists were successful in germinating it.